There is a quiet kind of confusion that settles deep inside the heart when you have offered your kindness freely, when you have spoken with care, when you have chosen patience over pride, and still you find yourself standing beneath the shadow of someone else's resentment. You begin asking yourself what words you used that they could not hear, what gesture you gave that they decided to misunderstand. What part of your light made them turn away instead of coming closer? It is a painful realization, the understanding that goodness does not always bring goodness back in return. You grow up believing kindness is a bridge, that if you are warm, others will answer you with warmth, that if you are honest, others will respond with honesty, that if you carry yourself with grace, the world will recognize it and reflect it back to you. But life, in its difficult honesty, teaches something deeper, something less comforting but much more real. It teaches you that kindness is not a transaction. It is not a guarantee. It is not armor that protects you from misunderstanding, envy, or rejection. Sometimes your kindness becomes a mirror, and not everyone is prepared to hear themselves clearly. There are people who will look at your calm spirit and feel uncomfortable, not because you have hurt them, but because your peace shines light on the chaos living inside them. There are people who will hear your gentle words and somehow feel accused, even when you have spoken nothing against them, because your softness reminds them of the harshness they have lived with, or perhaps the harshness they have become. And there are people who will watch you give without asking, love without conditions, stand without bitterness, and instead of feeling inspired, they feel exposed. It is not your fault that your presence awakens discomfort within them. You must understand that people do not always hate what is wrong. Sometimes they resist what is right, especially when it challenges the story they have been telling themselves for years. When you choose kindness in a world that often rewards cruelty, you quietly disrupt expectations. You refuse to follow the rules that say hardness equals strength and distance equals power. That refusal, that silent rebellion inside your spirit can make people uneasy. Some people have survived by building walls so high that they can no longer even see their own hearts anymore. Your kindness knocks softly on those walls, not to destroy them, but simply to remind them there is another way to live. But reminders can feel threatening to someone who has spent years believing their way is the only way. So they push back, not because you are unworthy, but because you are unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things, even beautiful things, can frighten people. There are also people who mistake kindness for weakness. They were taught that strength means being unyielding, dominating others, taking control, always having power over someone else. When they see you choosing compassion instead of conflict, they assume you are someone who can be ignored, dismissed, or taken advantage of. But when you refuse to fit into the small box they created for you, when you stay firm in your values while remaining gentle, it confuses them. Confusion often becomes discomfort, and discomfort, when left unexamined, often becomes dislike. So they create stories about you, stories that justify how they feel, stories that make your kindness look suspicious, your silence appear arrogant, your generosity seem like a hidden agenda, because it is easier for them to rewrite who you are than to question who they have become. You must not carry the weight of those stories. They do not belong to you. There are people who will resent you simply because you are comfortable with yourself, because you are not chasing validation the way they are, because you are not twisting yourself into shapes that make everyone comfortable while sacrificing your own soul. Your self-acceptance becomes a quiet reminder of their own self-doubt. Instead of turning inward to heal, they turn outward to blame. They look at you and wonder why things seem easier for you, never seeing the battles you fought quietly in the dark. They do not see the nights you questioned your own worth. They do not see the moments you chose growth over bitterness. They do not see the discipline it takes to stay kind in a world that often gives you every reason not to be. Kindness is not weakness. It is strength that learned how to remain gentle. It is power that chooses not to harm. It is courage refusing to harden even after being wounded. But not everyone understands that kind of strength. Some people only recognize loudness as power, aggression as confidence, control as authority. Your quiet resilience does not fit into their understanding, so they dismiss it. And inside that dismissal, there can be resentment. There are also people who project their own insecurities onto you. They see something inside you that they either wish they had or fear they may never have. It could be your confidence, your clarity, your grounded nature, your refusal to engage in negativity. Instead of admitting admiration, instead of allowing it to inspire them, they twist it into something darker. Jealousy disguised as criticism, insecurity disguised as dislike, pain disguised as anger. And if you are not careful, you will begin believing them. You will start questioning your kindness, wondering if you should become less open, less giving, less yourself. But shrinking yourself will never make you acceptable to people who already decided not to understand you. It will only make you lose the parts of yourself that were never the problem. You must learn to stand in your truth even when nobody applauds it, even when it is misunderstood, even when it is met with resistance, because your kindness is not meant to be a performance for others. It is a reflection of your character, and who you are should never be negotiated for the comfort of people who cannot appreciate it. There is a difference between being kind and being naive. Kindness does not mean allowing yourself to be mistreated. It does not mean staying silent when you are disrespected. It does not mean sacrificing your boundaries in the name of being good. Real kindness includes yourself too. It means knowing when to step back, when to say no, when to walk away. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is refuse to stay in environments that slowly destroy your spirit. There will always be people who misunderstand you. That is a truth you cannot escape. But misunderstanding does not define you. Their perception is not your identity. You can be sincere, thoughtful, genuine, and still be disliked by someone who already decided how they want to see you. And that decision often has very little to do with you. It is shaped by their wounds, fears, experiences, beliefs, and unresolved pain. You simply become the surface onto which they project those things. So do not take every reaction personally. Not every emotion directed at you belongs to you. Some of it is borrowed pain. Some of it is unhealed history. Some of it comes from battles you were never part of. Yet somehow you become the target, not because you deserve it, but because you are visible, because you are different. And being different, even in beautiful ways, can attract both admiration and resentment at the same time. You must decide which voices deserve your attention. The voices tearing you down, or the voices reminding you of your worth. The voices questioning your kindness, or the voices recognizing its strength. Because if you allow every negative opinion to shape your identity, you will slowly become someone built on fear instead of truth. And fear is a weak foundation for any life. You cannot control how people feel about you. You cannot force understanding where there is none. You cannot make someone appreciate what they already chose to dismiss, but you can control your response. You can choose to stay grounded. You can choose to protect your peace. You can choose to remain kind, not because kindness is always rewarded, but because it reflects who you truly are. And that choice, that steady loyalty to your values, is where your real power lives. There is a quiet dignity in being misunderstood while still remaining true to yourself, in being disliked without becoming bitter, in being judged without deciding to judge in return. That is not weakness, that is mastery. Mastery over your spirit, mastery over your reactions, mastery over the parts of yourself that could easily become cold but choose not to. You will never be everyone's favorite person, and that is not failure, it is reality. Some people are not meant to understand you. Some people are not meant to walk beside you. Some people are only meant to teach you something, even if the lesson arrives wrapped in discomfort. One of the greatest lessons you will ever learn is this: you do not need everyone's approval to be worthy. You do not need everyone's understanding to be valid. You do not need acceptance from every person in order to belong. Your worth is not a public vote. It is not determined by how many people approve of you. It is not measured by how perfectly you fit inside someone else's expectations. Your worth is already yours, and no misunderstanding can take that away unless you hand it over willingly. So let them misunderstand. Let them question. Let them feel whatever they choose to feel, but do not allow it to change the core of who you are. Do not allow it to make you doubt your kindness, because this world does not need less kindness. It needs more people brave enough to remain kind even when it is difficult, even when it is ignored, even when it is misunderstood. Your kindness is never wasted. It may not always be recognized by the people you expect, but it leaves marks in places you may never see. It touches lives quietly. It creates ripples far beyond the moment itself. Sometimes the person resenting you today may one day remember you as the example that changed them. But even if they never do, your kindness still matters because it shapes you. It keeps you aligned with your truth. It allows you to move through life without carrying the heavy poison of bitterness. And that freedom is something many people are still searching for. So do not shrink, do not harden your heart, do not lose yourself trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. Stand in your light even when it makes others uncomfortable, especially then, because your light is not the problem. It is proof that another way of living exists. Not everyone is ready for that truth, but that does not mean you dim yourself. It means you honor your light, protect it. Continue being who you are, not for applause, but for your own integrity. And inside that integrity, you will find something greater than acceptance. You will find peace. Being different often attracts silent jealousy instead of open admiration. And this truth reveals itself slowly, not through loud arguments, but through subtle changes in energy, in the way people react to your presence, in the quiet distance that forms without explanation. You may walk into a room simply being yourself, carrying your natural way of thinking, speaking, and existing. Yet something about you unsettles the silent order others have become comfortable with. It is not always your success that creates this reaction. Sometimes it is simply your authenticity, the way you do not imitate, the way you stay rooted in yourself without asking permission or seeking constant validation. People are often trained to admire what feels familiar, what fits neatly into expectations, what follows the unwritten rules of acceptance. When someone gently steps outside that pattern, even without rebellion, it disrupts the sameness many people find comfort in. Your difference becomes noticeable not because you are trying to stand out, but because you are not trying to disappear. And that quiet distinction can become powerful enough to attract attention that is never spoken aloud. Admiration requires openness, a willingness to acknowledge that another person carries qualities worth appreciating. But jealousy, especially silent jealousy, hides itself carefully. It hides behind polite smiles, behind surface-level conversations, behind interactions that appear normal while carrying hidden tension underneath. You may notice some people rarely celebrate your growth. They change the subject when your achievements are mentioned. Their compliments feel incomplete, as if something remains unsaid. This happens because your difference reminds them of something they feel they lack or something they have not allowed themselves to become. It is not always directly about you. Often it is about the comparison forming quietly inside their mind. They measure themselves against you, not because you ask them to, but because your existence introduces another possibility for how life can be lived. And instead of expressing admiration, which requires humility, they retreat into silence. That silence carries weight. It reveals itself through emotional distance, lack of support, small dismissive behaviors that seem insignificant alone but create patterns over time. You begin sensing something is wrong without fully understanding it at first. Being different also means you are harder to predict, and unpredictability makes some people uncomfortable. When your choices do not follow expected patterns, when your behavior cannot easily be placed inside familiar categories, it creates uncertainty. Many people feel safe when they can predict others, when they can place people neatly into boxes. But when you quietly resist categorization by simply being yourself, it unsettles those who depend on those structures. This discomfort does not always become open, it turns inward, growing into silent jealousy fueled by comparison, insecurity, and the quiet question of why you can live this way while they feel unable to. It becomes easier for them to distance themselves than to confront those uncomfortable questions honestly. You may notice some people pulling away as you become more aligned with yourself, not because you changed negatively, but because your growth highlights the places where they feel stuck. Your individuality becomes a mirror reflecting the limitations they placed on themselves, and not everyone is ready to face that reflection. There is also a habit people have of minimizing what they do not understand. When your path looks different, when your mindset breaks from common patterns, others may downplay it to make it seem less meaningful. Not always intentionally, but as a way to protect their own sense of comfort. If they convince themselves your difference is unimportant, then they do not have to question their own choices. Yet underneath it all, there is often quiet awareness that what you carry matters, and when that awareness mixes with insecurity, silent jealousy grows quietly in the background. Being different requires courage, even when you do not realize it. To exist without constantly adjusting yourself for approval, to speak honestly, to make decisions based on your values instead of external pressure. All of this takes strength. And that strength can intimidate people who spent their lives prioritizing acceptance over authenticity. They may never say it directly, but your independence challenges their entire way of living. It raises questions they are not ready to answer. It suggests another way to exist, one requiring self-trust and honesty. Instead of embracing that possibility, many resist it quietly inside themselves. The support you expected may not always come from the people you thought it would. The recognition you hoped for may be replaced with indifference or subtle dismissal. That can hurt deeply, especially when your intentions are genuine. But silent jealousy is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is evidence of unresolved struggles inside the people feeling it. Your difference does not need to be softened to make others comfortable. It is not a flaw needing correction. It is simply part of who you are, and the reactions it creates belong to others, shaped by their fears, experiences, and insecurities. There will always be people who appreciate you sincerely, people who recognize your uniqueness and celebrate it openly. But there will also be people who watch quietly from a distance, feeling emotions they cannot fully explain. Both types of people exist in the same world, sometimes even in the same room. Learning how to navigate this reality requires awareness instead of defensiveness. It requires understanding energy shifts without immediately assuming you did something wrong. It requires staying grounded in your identity, trusting that your way of existing remains valid even when it is not widely understood. You are not responsible for managing everyone's feelings about your difference. You are not required to shrink yourself so others feel comfortable. The quiet tension surrounding you is not necessarily proof that you need to change direction. Often it is proof that you are finally living honestly.